Imagine hearing from the person who broke your heart years after they left you for someone else. Jack thought he'd moved on, buried the betrayal. But out of nowhere, his ex-wife calls him up, dragging secrets from the past that he never saw coming. Now, Jack is thrust back into a web of lies, manipulation, and hidden motives, all in a way that's too familiar, yet feels unsettlingly different. As the truth unravels, he's forced to confront painful questions, rediscover himself, and take back control. But this time, he's not the only one. Join Jack as he dives headfirst into a story of resilience, revenge, and surprising connections that will change everything he thought he knew.
Imagine my surprise when I saw her name pop up on my phone screen. Raquel. 7 years of silence. Not a single word since she left with that smug grin. Off with David, the married man she'd once sworn meant nothing. Her voice, a bit shaky, brought me back to memories I'd locked away. Therapy sessions, endless conversations about intentions, trust, and trying to repair what was broken. The call seemed urgent, though. There was something almost desperate there. I couldn't help but wonder, what does she want after all this time? The sound of her voice stirred up something familiar, yet bitter. Maybe satisfaction was a stretch, but I felt a small spark of anticipation. Why now? Why, after so much time, did she finally reach out? She started speaking, but it wasn't the gentle tone I remembered from better times. Instead, there was a tension there, a strange mix of restraint and need. "Jack, we need to talk," she said almost too calmly. Talk? After 7 years? The satisfaction I'd imagined quickly faded, replaced by a familiar ache. The last time we'd talked, she'd been on her way out, taking our shared years and memories like they were nothing. Now, here she was, as if this conversation could somehow make it all right. But what did she expect? As I listened, I could feel my own intentions shifting, as if preparing for something I couldn't quite see yet. Her words kept circling in my mind even after the call ended. There was something behind that voice, an unspoken urgency. I knew there'd be no satisfaction without answers, but I wasn't sure if I'd like what I'd find. This call, this unexpected reminder of an old wound, stirred up emotions I thought were buried. Would this be a chance to understand, to finally make sense of the mess she'd left behind? Or was I just walking into another round of hurt? One thing was certain, I wasn't going to just let it pass. No. If she wanted to open this door, I'd be ready, prepared for whatever intention she had hidden in her words. When Raquel finally arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. Time had changed her, but not enough to erase those memories. And then, there he was, David, right next to her, looking as if he belonged in my home. The same home I once built with her. She didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly introduced him as her partner. Partner. That word echoed in my mind like a taunt. 7 years of silence, and she walks back in here, barely acknowledging the past we had. The satisfaction she'd left with that day, years ago, still haunted me. And now, standing here with David, her indifference cut deeper than any word she'd spoken. As they made themselves comfortable, I couldn't shake the bitterness building inside me. There was no apology, no regret in her eyes. She sat there like this was the most natural thing in the world, like the years of promises and shared dreams meant nothing. And David? He looked at me with a faint smile, as if he were somehow above it all. I felt betrayed all over again. That same familiar pain from years ago, now resurfacing, more intense than ever. Had she brought him here just to humiliate me? To rub her satisfaction in my face? The intention behind this visit felt dark, twisted, as though they were both reliving their own victory at my expense. I stood there, feeling torn between confrontation and retreat. The silence between us grew heavy, thick with things left unsaid. This wasn't just about her betrayal years ago. It was about what we'd become now, two strangers barely hiding behind the masks of our past selves. Her audacity astounded me, but maybe that was her intention all along, to show me how little I mattered now. I knew this was only the beginning, that she wasn't done. Whatever satisfaction she sought, I had a feeling it was far from innocent. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder, what more was she hiding? I didn't hold back. As soon as the door closed, I turned to her, every ounce of betrayal from years past surging back with new force. Why now? I demanded. Why parade him in front of me like this? Raquel met my gaze, calm as ever, but with a flicker of something, defiance maybe. She didn't hesitate, launching into her reasons, a script I'd heard before. Neglect, emotional distance, my supposed lack of intention in keeping our connection alive. It was like hearing a stranger explain my own life, only twisted and reframed to fit her story. Each word felt designed to absolve her, placing blame back on me in some cruel attempt to justify everything she'd done. As she went on, that familiar satisfaction flickered in her eyes, a confidence that made me want to shout. How could she twist our past so easily, making her choices sound inevitable? I knew I hadn't been perfect, but I had tried. We both knew that. And yet here she was, turning every small fault, every misunderstanding, into some grand excuse for her actions. Then came the kicker. The real reason behind her call wasn't to find closure or to apologize. No, she needed me because David's wife had finally found out. There it was, her whole intention laid bare, her motives as self-serving as ever. Her words kept coming, but I had already started tuning out. All those years of trying to understand her, of wondering where we went wrong, it was all spinning in my mind now, but in a different way. It wasn't clarity she was after, it was control. She wanted me to shoulder her guilt, to make her feel justified in her choices. But the weight of her reasoning didn't add up. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity, like seeing her, finally, for who she truly was. And that look in her eyes, it told me that this confrontation was far from over. Not long after, Stace, Raquel's closest friend, called me up. We hadn't spoken much since the split, but this time, her voice was different, almost hesitant. She told me things that left me reeling, confirming what I'd suspected but never wanted to face. Raquel, it turned out, had been planning to leave me long before the affair even began. It wasn't just a moment of weakness or some fleeting attraction. No, she'd been looking for an escape, orchestrating her moves behind the scenes. And David? He wasn't even the first. Apparently, Raquel had been involved with another married man years ago. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a pattern. Hearing all this from Stace felt surreal, like the truth had finally surfaced, leaving me to pick up the pieces of an illusion I'd clung to for years. Raquel's intentions had never been what I thought. Each memory of us together suddenly felt tainted, as if the satisfaction she took in her secret life had been there all along, just hidden from me. Stace seemed almost apologetic, like she regretted sharing these details, but there was no stopping it now. My history with Raquel was unfolding in ways I couldn't control, leaving me wondering what else she'd kept from me. Had our entire relationship been built on a lie? Even after the call ended, I was left there, grappling with this new understanding. I realized then that I'd spent years hoping, trying, believing that things could have been different. But maybe the real issue had never been my lack of attention or intention. Maybe it was her need for something more, a thrill or satisfaction I could never give her. As I sat there, the weight of it all settled in, and for the first time, I began to question everything about our past together. Whatever came next, I knew I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face. After Stace's revelations, a deep sense of abandonment settled in, a feeling I thought I'd left behind. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd let myself believe. Every moment I'd spent trying to make things work, every conversation where I'd poured out my intentions to fix us, seemed hollow now. Raquel's satisfaction had never been about building something together. She'd wanted something I could never provide. Sitting there, it hit me just how little I'd meant to her in the end. I wanted to believe there was something real in what we shared, but it was hard to feel anything but emptiness now. My emotions swung wildly between anger and sadness. How had I been so blind? All those years, I convinced myself she was worth it, that the issues between us were just bumps in the road. But as the truth began to settle, so did a cold, unwavering clarity. Raquel had never been in it for us. She'd crafted her own narrative, leaving me in the shadows of her choices. The life we'd built had been nothing more than a backdrop for her escapades, her search for satisfaction in places I couldn't reach. Slowly, I started to see that our past had been marked by lies more than love. Eventually, the realization became undeniable. I couldn't stay here in this house, surrounded by memories that felt like ghosts. Leaving felt like the only way to free myself from her hold. I packed a bag, feeling the weight lift with every item I left behind. This wasn't just an ending. It was a chance to rediscover who I was, free from the web of deception that had defined my life with her. In that quiet resolve, I found something I hadn't felt in years, a flicker of peace, a faint yet promising satisfaction in reclaiming myself. Not long after I left, Linda, David's wife, reached out. Meeting her felt strange, like peering into a mirror reflecting my own wounds. She had the same look of exhaustion, a weariness I knew all too well. Sitting across from her, I realized we'd both been casualties of Raquel and David's tangled intentions. Sharing our stories was both painful and oddly comforting. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in this betrayal. Linda listened, nodding with a quiet understanding. Her own satisfaction found in knowing the truth, harsh as it was, about her own life. It was a strange comfort, a bittersweet solidarity. As we talked, Linda shared details that mirrored my own experiences. There were uncanny similarities. The secrecy, the web of lies, the little hints that something was off. Each revelation was like peeling back a layer of betrayal, exposing the rawness beneath. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was the realization that we'd both been living in shadows, deceived by those we trusted most. Despite the pain, I found a strange satisfaction in Linda's company. Our connection wasn't about rehashing anger, but understanding, validating the experience that had so deeply scarred us both. By the end of our conversation, we shared a silence that spoke volumes. There were no words to fix what had happened, no easy solutions to soothe the wounds left by Raquel and David's actions. But meeting Linda gave me something unexpected, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time, I felt an intention to move forward without looking back, to let go of the questions that had haunted me. Linda had been a stranger hours ago, but in her, I found a bond that reminded me I wasn't as alone as I thought. We parted with a quiet promise to ourselves, to seek peace beyond the hurt. With the clarity I gained from meeting Linda, I knew it was time to put everything to rest. The next day, I contacted an attorney, ready to begin the divorce process. It felt oddly satisfying, as if reclaiming my life from Raquel's grasp, finally dismantling the remnants of what once was. It wasn't anger driving me now, but a quiet determination. Each step felt purposeful, as if every paper I signed, every document filed, marked a return to my own intentions. This was the closure I'd needed for so long, and with it came a strange relief. Back at home, I started sorting through our belongings, separating hers from mine. Things I'd once cherished, photos, souvenirs from vacations, even our wedding gifts, now felt like weights tied to memories I no longer wanted to carry. I packed them away, creating space in my life for something new, something unsullied by the past. It was a symbolic shedding, almost like I was peeling off layers of an old identity. The satisfaction in doing so was quiet but profound, a sign that I was truly ready to let go of the life I'd clung to for far too long. As the days went by, the house felt lighter, almost like it was becoming mine again, free from Raquel's presence. I rearranged the furniture, removed little decorations she'd chosen, even bought a few new things that reflected the person I was now. It was a slow transformation, but with each change, I felt a renewed sense of control and freedom. This wasn't just a physical shift, it was a mental one, a step toward independence and new beginnings. I could finally see a path forward, one where I could find satisfaction, not in the past, but in what lay ahead. A few weeks later, I had an unexpected visitor. David, of all people, showed up at my door, looking haggard and defeated. I almost shut the door on him, but something in his eyes made me pause. He looked lost, as if he too had been caught in the same web that Raquel had woven. I invited him in, both out of curiosity and perhaps a lingering sense of justice. He began to talk, sharing how Raquel had left him, too. Apparently, her satisfaction was short-lived, and now he was as discarded as I'd been. It was strange, a mix of vindication and pity. As David spoke, his own regret and confusion became evident. He admitted that he'd been swept up, manipulated into believing he was special, only to find himself alone in the end. Listening to him, I could see how Raquel had drawn him in, likely with the same intentions she'd once used with me. Our situations were more similar than I'd expected, and I realized he was another casualty of her pursuit of excitement and control. Oddly, I felt the urge to console him, despite the anger I'd felt toward him for years. After all, he was as much a pawn in her game as I had been. By the end of our conversation, I found myself offering him advice. Move on, I told him. Don't let her control you any longer. In that moment, I saw him not as the man who'd taken Raquel from me, but as someone who'd been hurt just as deeply. As he left, I felt a strange satisfaction, like a chapter was finally closing. His visit had given me a new perspective, proof that Raquel's intentions had left no one unscathed. For the first time, I felt free, ready to step into a future that had nothing to do with her or the wreckage she'd left behind. With Raquel finally out of my life, I began to feel an overwhelming sense of freedom, a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. My house, once filled with traces of our life together, now felt like a blank canvas, ready to reflect the person I was becoming. I spent days reimagining my space, rearranging every room, choosing colors and decor that brought me satisfaction rather than memories. This wasn't just redecorating, it was reclaiming my sanctuary, every decision a statement of independence. It was a simple act, but one that gave me the intention and focus I'd been craving. The transformation went beyond my surroundings. I started waking up with new energy, eager to dive into routines and projects that had once felt tedious. I rediscovered hobbies I'd shelved years ago, picking up books, painting, even cooking recipes I'd always wanted to try. Each day, I felt myself becoming stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. This journey to redefine myself brought a satisfaction that Raquel's approval had never given me. I was no longer living for someone else's validation, no longer waiting for a past love to return. This was my life, my terms, and I felt a peace that went deeper than words. And as the days turned to weeks, I found myself thinking of the future not with hesitation, but with hope. There was so much possibility, and I realized I was ready to embrace it without the shadows of betrayal or resentment. I was free to imagine what I wanted my life to look like and the people I wanted to share it with. This newfound sense of freedom was more than just moving on from Raquel. It was a step toward a life where I could define my own happiness. And for the first time, I felt the genuine satisfaction of being truly at peace with myself. With the past finally behind me, I found myself feeling something I hadn't dared to in years: hope. It was quiet at first, like a gentle pulse in the background, but it grew stronger with each passing day. I could see now that the pain and betrayal, as consuming as they'd been, had given me a new perspective, a clarity I hadn't known before. Instead of regret, I felt a sense of gratitude, as if every heartbreak had brought me closer to understanding what I truly wanted from life. The satisfaction of knowing I'd made it through felt like a victory, and it filled me with anticipation for what lay ahead. With each step forward, I embraced the independence that came from letting go of Raquel and all that she represented. I could now see a future defined by my choices, my passions, my goals. It was no longer about proving anything to anyone. It was about building a life where I could find peace and joy, unburdened by old wounds. I took up new challenges, created fresh routines, and connected with people who valued honesty and respect. Every day felt like a new opportunity to grow, a reminder that I had reclaimed my life and intentions fully for myself. As I looked out at the world with a sense of renewed possibility, I felt an unshakable confidence that hadn't been there before. For the first time, I understood that the hardships I'd endured had led me to a place of profound resilience. I no longer saw my story as one of loss, but as one of transformation. And in this new chapter, I could finally say I was at peace with my past, with myself, and with whatever the future might hold. The path forward was open, and the possibilities felt endless. This was my life, and it was mine to shape from here.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.